From the outside, you could say that NVIDIA looks like the luckiest company on the planet. They've managed to ride the wave of 4 massive technology shifts, executing perfectly every time: gaming, crypto, deep learning, and now generative AI. But there's a twist. The thing that made NVIDIA insanely rich, cloud AI, might be the very thing that trips them up, as the bottleneck now shifts from GPUs back to power. That shift is a huge issue for NVIDIA, and some say their luck has run out. Last quarter, NVIDIA reported $57 billion in revenue. Of that, $51 billion came from data centers. That's not a business segment, that's the business. And such concentration leaves them highly exposed, especially if AI moves out of the cloud onto devices, as I believe it will. It would mean that NVIDIA's entire business model comes under pressure. Now, you can argue that NVIDIA is the luckiest company in history. A graphics card maker for gamers suddenly becomes the world's most valuable company. Who could have predicted that? But of course, that undersells what actually happened. NVIDIA didn't catch the technology wave, they built the surfboards to ride the waves, and then they sold those surfboards for everybody to use. It was a really clever strategy. So let's break that down. NVIDIA grew up selling graphics horsepower to gamers, and gamers never stopped demanding more. Every year, players wanted better textures, higher frame rates, and more realistic lighting. Game developers pushed the hardware to its limits, and gamers paid premium prices to stay on the cutting edge. It was relentless. It was a never-ending upgrade cycle, and it taught NVIDIA how to build better and better hardware to process vast amounts of data in parallel. Think about what a GPU actually does. Every frame of a video game requires millions of calculations. Lighting, shadows, reflections, physics, all these things happen simultaneously. A CPU would die under that workload, but a GPU eats this kind of stuff for breakfast. And that difference is what matters, because parallel computing is basically the whole trick behind generative AI. Then came the second wave. In the mid-2000s, researchers started wondering if they could use graphics cards for things that weren't graphics, such as scientific simulations, financial modeling, and machine learning. NVIDIA recognized what was happening and jumped on board early. In 2006, they released CUDA, a programming framework that let developers write general-purpose code for GPUs. This made it much easier for non-game developers to access this GPU horsepower for other purposes. Before CUDA, programming a GPU was brutal. You really had to trick the hardware into thinking that your scientific calculations were like graphics operations. But CUDA changed that by making it easier, so researchers started to use it for deep learning. In 2012, a neural network called AlexNet absolutely obliterated the competition in an image recognition challenge. Its breakthrough was that the algorithm was trained on NVIDIA GPUs. What would have taken weeks on CPUs took days on graphics cards. So researchers took notice, and within a couple of years, every serious AI lab in the world was buying and training on NVIDIA hardware. By the time the competitors realized what was happening, NVIDIA wasn't just selling chips, they were selling the entire tool chain thanks to CUDA. Then came the third wave, and this one NVIDIA almost certainly didn't see coming: crypto mining. When Bitcoin arrived, developers needed raw computational power to mint new coins and to validate transaction ledgers. Miners discovered that GPUs were vastly more efficient than CPUs for these calculations, so they started using NVIDIA GPUs to give them the edge. And the demand was insane. And gamers got pissed off because GPUs became in short supply. Some retailers even imposed purchase limits, and cards often sold out within seconds of restocking. Of course, NVIDIA's stock soared. Then it crashed, then it soared again. And the whole crypto market's wild swings dragged GPU sales along for the ride. And for investors, this was chaos. That NVIDIA had to manage earnings calls explaining why gaming revenue was actually mining revenue in disguise. So they tried to create separate mining-specific cards, but they still struggled to forecast demand when their biggest customers were speculators chasing volatile tokens. So gaming funded the R&D, deep learning validated the architecture, and crypto tested the supply chain. And through each technology wave, NVIDIA became stronger, more diversified, and better prepared for whatever came next. And of course, what came next was the biggest wave of all. When ChatGPT launched in 2022, everything changed. Generative AI went from a research curiosity to a global obsession almost overnight. Suddenly, every company on Earth wanted to build, train, and deploy large language models, and every single one of them needed GPUs. The scale of the training was staggering. GPT reportedly required tens of thousands of NVIDIA cards running for months, and all of the big technology companies were writing billion-dollar checks for NVIDIA hardware. Data centers weren't being built fast enough, and cloud providers couldn't secure enough chips, so waiting lists stretch into years. But training is just the beginning. Once you've built a model, you have to serve it. So every time someone asks ChatGPT a question, or every time Claude writes a response, or every time Midjourney generates an image, we have to use GPUs to retrieve the response. That's millions of users, billions of queries, all demanding instant response. Then it got worse. Then came the agents. These are AI systems that don't just answer questions, but take actions, and they reason through problems through multi-step workflows. Each agent interaction might require dozens of model calls, so the compute demand multiplied again. Every part of AI is GPU hungry, and for years, NVIDIA has been the heart of it all. So yes, NVIDIA looks incredibly lucky. The world's hottest industry is basically a race to buy whatever they're selling right now. It's a real shame that GPUs don't run on hype, because there's no shortage of that. But there is a shortage of electricity. And unfortunately, GPUs run on electricity. And when you pack them densely into a giant data center, they also require cooling, transformers, and all sorts of other infrastructure. So the world has backed a technology model that's not scalable. The issue is not whether we want more AI, but whether we have the resources to provide it. The current cloud AI model assumes infinite scalability. But you just can't scale your way past the laws of physics, and you can't just spin up a new power station. Every new data center competes for the same constrained resources, water and electricity. And this is the crack in the foundation that Silicon Valley doesn't want to talk about. And with 90% of NVIDIA's revenue coming from the data center model, that's their Achilles heel. So where does this leave us? Well, NVIDIA built an empire on the assumption that AI would live in the cloud. And for training massive models, that's probably still the right answer. But inferencing, the part where AI actually serves to users, that's a different story. Every AI query that runs locally is a query that doesn't need a data center. Every device with a neural engine is one less customer waiting in line for cloud compute. And right now, Apple has shipped hundreds of millions of devices with precisely that capability. So while everyone's watching NVIDIA's stock price and hyperscaler CapEx announcements, Apple has been quietly deploying AI infrastructure at scale that no cloud provider can ever match. And it's sitting in your pocket. The next chapter of AI might not be written in data centers at all. It might well be written on the device that you hold in your hand. And that could be incredibly bad luck for the world's most lucky company. If you found this perspective useful, please consider subscribing. This channel is for people who want to think about technology critically and not just follow the hype.